Okay.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to talk through Shoulder to Shoulder and this ethical leadership program in Costa Rica. We're going to leave a lot of time for questions, so feel free to come with anything. Thank you so much for joining too this early on. I think the sooner the better to get all this information is really helpful, especially because students have to qualify. And Catherine and I can touch on that aspect if you have anything regarding Alpha. And then Bill with Shoulder to Shoulder, he can answer all of the logistics Costa Rica side, because he's been through it, and Shoulder to Shoulder is just such a wonderfully renowned program. So we're really excited to partner with them, and just know that your students will be in amazing hands with this team, as well as Catherine and I will join, but we're really excited to share. So we'll pass it over to Bill to go through kind of everything you need.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Bill Cotter. I'm the Director of Programming at Student Shoulder to Shoulder. And I'm based part-time in Costa Rica and part-time in the United States. So I know all of our programs really well, but this one in particular, it's just 2 hours from each of the two sites we'll be at. It's just 2 hours from my house in Costa Rica. So it feels like a second home to me, and really excited to walk you all through the program. What I thought I would do, I know you have a copy of the presentation. I'll just quickly roll through the presentation. I won't read each slide to you, just to give you an overview of the program. And then I really want to open up to you for any questions that you all have about logistics, Costa Rica, work the students will be doing, or anything like that. Let me just go ahead here and share my screen. And we are recording too, so we'll share that at the end if anything comes up. Oh, and someone just joined. Good timing. Can you all see my screen there? Excellent. Okay. So this program, as you all know, will be headed to Costa Rica. A little bit of background about Shoulder to Shoulder. So we are an organization. I know there's a lot of travel-based organizations for students that exist out there. The key differentiator for Shoulder to Shoulder is that we really are focused on this idea of ethical leadership. So any of our program sites, including Costa Rica that we work with a nonprofit partner or an NGO, non-governmental organization, that serves as the basis for our work. So within those organizations, we look to the communities that are there and the leaders within those communities to be examples for our students to look at the characteristics of ethical leadership, to think about how is this community coming together to solve a particular issue or problem in their area? And then how might I use what I learned there to come back to my own backyard or my own hometown to look at issues that I'm passionate about and the inspiration that I've had from these leaders and apply that, in this case, back in Austin. So all of our programs have 3 phases. Before students go, they take some time learning about the context of the place that they're going, learning about some key ideas about ethical leadership. In the case of custom programs like this, usually that will happen at school, but of course the students will have the link and they can share that with you when they're at home too. If you want to see the videos, if you want to see what the students are learning about, by all means. Sometimes parents are really curious about where their students are going. So that phase 1 is a great chance for that. Phase 2 is what we call our field study. So it's a field study in ethical leadership. The idea here is that students are on the ground as leaders, but also learning from leaders. We really flip it from the idea of a service learning approach to learning service. So it takes a lot of weight off the students to think, hey, I have to go to this place. I have no skills. How am I supposed to help, save, all these kind of words that come around this idea of service. And so we really stress to students the idea that primarily you're here to learn. The service will be supporting, the communities that you're in by experiencing the work that they're doing. But we don't expect you to be experts. We don't expect you to come down for a week and solve all of the problems in this particular area. But hopefully you can be shoulder to shoulder with our nonprofit partner, learning about the work they're doing in that community, and then bringing that learning back on your path to ethical leadership. So we really talk to students about how phase 2 is meant to be a learning and inspiration for their future. We don't think after 1 week, you're going to be ethical leaders and be able to solve all of the global issues in the world. But hopefully it helps students identify issues that they're passionate about, and also meet leaders who have connected their passions to issues in their own community as an inspiration for moving further on. And then in phase 3, students will be working on how can they find issues in their own backyard that we say that they can apply their learnings about ethical leadership, things that they learned in Costa Rica, and bring that back to their own hometown. So sometimes students will work on issues directly related, like around food security or environment, or students just meet someone who is really passionate about their work and thinks, I'm really passionate about education. How can I combine my passion for education with things that are happening in the Austin area? And all of the curriculum we use, again, the students are more than welcome to share that with you. The phase 1 is online, so they can share the link with you. And then during the phase 2, when we're on the ground, we have a leadership circle every night where we reflect on ideas around ethical leadership. And so you can definitely ask your students to see that as well. But each evening, we process the day, thinking about what we learned, but thinking about it through various lenses of ethical leadership. So what did we learn today about sharing leadership? What did we learn today about empathy, compassion, and things like that? On this program, we're going to be working in 2 different locations. One is in Rancho Quemado, which is on the, someone else just came in, sorry, is on the Osa Peninsula. So it's about a 7-hour drive from San Jose. Rancho Quemado is a small community of around 300 members who live on the border of a national park. And I think what impresses each group that comes here the most is just how this community has come together to try and enable them to live their lives, to make money, to survive, but also to protect the national park that is around them. So especially, I think, in a day and age where there's lots of division, both in the US and abroad, most of the students, when we're in those leadership circles, are just amazed at how the people of Rancho Quemado have really come together. It hasn't been easy to bring them all together, but have all come together around this idea of how can we do well for ourselves, but also do well for the environment that surrounds us. So while we're in Rancho Quemado, students will have a chance to be part of different committees that are happening there. So there's committees around wildlife conservation, committees around climate change. So they have a chance to experience that. But also being a small community, students will have a chance to play soccer, volleyball, or basketball with the students from the community every night. The cabins that we'll be staying at are run by a local family. So while it's not a homestay, it basically is, in the sense that the students' cabins are right around the main kitchen and hangout area of that family. And so it's just like a 1-minute walk from the cabin to the main kitchen area. So lots of times when we're not engaged in project work, students are hanging out in the kitchen, meeting the various family members that are there, having a chance to really learn about what life is like. And so one benefit of that really small community and the fact that we bring a lot of shoulder-to-shoulder groups there is we're really instantly welcomed by the community, and the students feel like they're part of daily life. So they're helping cook, they're cleaning dishes, playing soccer. They really are involved in whatever the day-to-day operations are in Rancho Quemado. After Rancho Quemado, we're going to take students to a different part of Costa Rica that's closer to San Jose as we move back. That's Reserva Cloud Bridge, which is a private reserve in the cloud forest where a group of people have come together again to protect this natural environment and to reforest an area that was destroyed due to cattle farming. So about 20 years ago, there was no trees there, really not much at all. They've planted a huge amount of trees and now have a bunch of different groups that are working on monitoring the wildlife in the area and looking about this comeback both of trees and wildlife in that particular area. An interesting part of this is that students will have a chance to see the Osa Peninsula, which is, I think it's been named a few times the most biologically diverse place on Earth, and then have a chance to go up to the cloud forest, which is a completely different environment. So it's a little bit cooler. It's around 4,000 feet in elevation, whereas the Costa Peninsula is, right at sea level. So to have the chance to see these 2 very different geographic parts of Costa Rica, I think will give students that opportunity to see a part of Costa Rica that not a lot of people have the chance to see. I won't show, both these videos are a little bit long, but in the presentation you can see a little bit. There's a video about Rancho Quemado, and there's also a video about Cloud Bridge. The itinerary is also in there. One thing you can have a look at when you look at the presentation, but one thing we let students know too is that I think this is the biggest adjustment for most students, because most of their lives are very scheduled and they know what's happening, by the minute, is letting them, we go in with a general plan, but we really do work with our nonprofit partners in the communities to say, well, maybe it's raining or maybe it's really hot. So we thought we were going to do this and now we're going to do that. And so most days we let students know, okay, breakfast is at 8, and then after breakfast, we're going to be doing this activity. And then we'll come back at lunch, and then we'll look at what's going to be happening after lunch. And then after lunch, we'll look at what's happening after dinner. So we do those periodic updates. And the first few days are definitely hard for students. And then they start to really settle in to life in Costa Rica, which is a lot less scheduled than their daily lives at school. So the initial adjustment is hard. And then I think towards the end, they're like, oh, it's really hard to go back to having these really strict schedules and timeframes. But we do give them an overall itinerary and what to expect over the course of the 10 days and then over the course of each day. And for each student, they each have a chance to be the leader of the day. So as the leader of the day, they're the point person for all of the questions about, what's going to be happening today? What are we going to be eating? What do I need in my backpack? Do I need sunscreen? Is it going to be sunny? And it's a great chance for students to get to feel, and of course, we're there also to support with those answers, but it's a really good chance for the leader of the day to feel what it's like when everyone's asking you all sorts of questions. And it's funny when students say, we already talked about this in the morning, or they start using teacher language about, did you see this on the list, or did you see that? And so for me, I love the leader of the day and really pushing that leadership out. The students, of course, always with the support of the staff of our NGO and the staff of Shoulder to Shoulder and the staff of Alpha School behind them, but to really say, hey, you're in charge of this today. If someone forgets their hats or forgets sunscreen, it's your job as a leader to make them remember that. If someone's late to breakfast or late to lunch, it's your job as a leader, to remind them of those things too, which is really fun. Some logistics. Right now, it's been really difficult to find good group flights out of Austin during spring break. So the difference between a group flight and an individual flight is that on my end, for a group flight, I can reserve 12 seats on a plane going to Costa Rica for our exact dates, and I can hold those now just with a small deposit, as opposed to an individual flight, which is once everyone has signed up and I have their names, I just go directly to the airline site and book the flights. And if you've ever tried to book more than a few people, you know that you can only book 8 tickets at once. We book 8 tickets, and then we could book another 4. So the benefit of that is when you're booking individual flights, it can often be times $200 or $300 cheaper than a group flight. But at the same time, it's hard to estimate what the price would be. So for this program, what I did is I looked for a lot of different group flights, didn't find great ones, but I did find one. Let's pull it up here. This one's out of Dallas. And this is just in case when we go to book the individual flights, and I'll send this to you all. If we go to book the individual flights and they're like $1,500 or there's not enough space, what I wanted to do was reserve at least a flight that we knew we could get to and get home from. And this flight was around $850. So when we book the individual ones, we're hoping to find them cheaper, but I didn't want to be left with, we have no group flight, and then we go to book individual flights and we don't have them. So as soon as everyone signs up for this, I'll go ahead and update you all about flights, but it wouldn't be more than $850 for the flight. And if we're able to book them directly out of Austin, and it's cheaper, that would be the ideal, but at least we have a backup in case that doesn't work. The lodging for our students is safe and comfortable. It's definitely, I like to tell students, it is rustic. Most of the cabins that will stay at are simple wood structures. They're all closed in. They have screens, they have bathrooms, they have hot water, and they have fans. They don't have air conditioning, but usually while the days are hot at this time of year in Costa Rica, where we are, at least in Rancho Quemado, the nights are a little bit cooler. Because we are directly on the border of a national park, there are lots of bugs around. We warn students about that. Most of them are totally harmless, but when you come into your room and you see like a frog in the shower or a spider that's the size of your hand, it's not poisonous, but it gives students a bit of a scare. So we just prepare them to the fact that there is a lot of wildlife around. We don't touch it. If you walk in on it, you can just let someone know and they can move it out for you. But while the accommodations are rustic, they're really comfortable, safe. And as I mentioned, all the cabins are in a circle around each other. So we'll always be just like a few seconds walk from each of the student cabins. Students will be in cabins around about 3 to 5 people per cabin. And then the leaders will each have their own room that are next to those cabins. Once we move to Cloudbridge, we'll be staying in more of a hostel type setup. So it's a little bit less rustic than in Rancho Quemado. But again, students will be sharing rooms of about 3 to 5 of them in each room. The leaders will have their own rooms, and the rooms will be right next to each other at that hostel. there's a lot less bugs up there, and the temperature, especially if they've been in Rancho Quemado, the temperature will be down kind of in the mid 60s at night. So they'll really appreciate having a chance to cool down. And then the daytime temperatures are usually like 75 or 80. So like Cloudbridge is the ideal climate of never too hot and never too cold. In terms of food, we've run this program with lots of different allergies, dietary restrictions. So part of the admissions process is I'll collect medical information about the students going and check with you about that, but we're able to accommodate that. We pass that information on to our partners, whether it's food allergies, any kind of allergies that come up, or dietary restrictions. They're really, really accommodating, and they're used to working with groups. So if you have any concerns about that, you can let me know, but I feel like we've dealt with most allergies and restrictions with no problem at all. And in terms of transportation, once we land in Costa Rica, Rancho Quemado has their own private bus that holds 20 people. And so they'll pick us up in San Jose. They'll drive us down to Rancho Quemado. They'll drive us to Cloudbridge, and then we'll have a private bus that drives us from Cloudbridge back to San Jose, which is about 2 hours. So we'll land in San Jose. Depending on the flight times, we'll most likely spend the night at a hotel right near the airport, wake up the next morning, drive to Rancho Quemado. As I mentioned, that first drive, it's only about 120 miles, but things move slow. Traffic-wise in Costa Rica, just one lane each way. So it takes about 7 hours. We usually stop midway in Novita, which is where I'm based, which is about 4 hours from San Jose. Stop, have lunch, stretch our legs, maybe have a chance to go look at the beach quick, and then drive the last 3 hours. So that first drive is a little bit long, but as I mentioned, on the way back up from Rancho Quemado to Cloudbridge is about 4 hours. And then we'll have a few days at Cloudbridge, and then it'll be 2 hours to San Jose. So the ride back will be broken up with that stop in the middle there. And then the last part, as you know, so the dates are March 22nd to the 31st. The tuition is $37.99. As I mentioned, the airfare will be no more than $8.50, but hopefully we can find individual flights out of Austin for cheaper than that. Two representatives from Alpha School will be going. One person from Shoulder to Shoulder will be going. As part of all of our programs, we have a 24/7 support line that you all can connect. So it's myself. I don't know why that stopped there. I can just turn it off, but it'll be myself, our executive director, and Riley, who works in admissions at Shoulder to Shoulder. So you'll always be able to call, text, or email any of the Shoulder to Shoulder team. So you'll always have contact with us. All of our programs include insurance with Global Rescue. So Global Rescue provides two different things. One is emergency evacuation insurance. So if a student was to get hurt or sick and the level of care in Costa Rica was deemed insufficient by Global Rescue, they would fly them back to the United States. That said, the level of care, especially in San Jose, is very high. I've done a lot of medical work there. It feels like you're at a hospital in the United States. And if needed, if Global Rescue said, hey, we really need to get this student to San Jose, we would not put them on a 7-hour bus to San Jose, but you could fly from Rancho Quemado to the small airport is about 30 minutes, and then it is a 40-minute flight from that airport to San Jose. So in the case of an emergency, we're about 30 minutes from the nearest airport. And then they put them, usually the planes that fly that distance are like a 12-person plane. I don't love flying. I've flown them plenty of times. It's good, but Global Rescue is great for those emergency situations. Most of the time when we're using Global Rescue, it really is just a medical advisory service. So they're connected to Johns Hopkins University. And anytime a student is sick, injured, anything like that, you know, if it's not something major where we need to go immediately to the hospital, we would call Global Rescue and say, so-and-so student is having stomach issues. It's been going on for a day now. Global Rescue would start a file, which means that they're looking into the student's case. They would start looking at different hospital options and doctor options if things don't improve. Or oftentimes I use it just as a sounding board, and they say, okay, you know, tell the student, try this 2 or 3 different things. If they're not feeling better in the morning, call back. And usually the student's feeling better. For our instructors, it's nice to have that direct line to doctors at Johns Hopkins. And oftentimes for the students, it's nice to know that's not just me saying, hey, this is going to be okay. You know, they're on the phone with me. I'm talking to Global Rescue. And for them to know that there's a doctor on the other side of that, that solves like 98% of our problems is just a student knowing like, okay, a doctor says it's going to be okay, I'm okay. But that insurance with global rescue is included in tuition as well. And I think I know I went over a lot of different pieces there in terms of our curriculum, where we're going, the itinerary, and what's included. But I'd like to open it up to you all if you have specific questions about shoulder to shoulder or any of the work we're going to be doing in Costa Rica or anything about Costa Rica in general. Way too much information all at once.
So what is the work they would be doing?
So there's two different parts. In Rancho Quemado, our days are usually split. The focus of the community of Rancho Quemado is on ecotourism. So a lot of what the students will do in the morning is learning about ecotourism by participating in activities. So some of the things that we'll be doing is visiting an organic farm and learning about how their farming techniques are done sustainably with a national park right there. We'll visit a former gold mine, and the family that lives there is literally living on top of a gold mine, but they've decided to stop mining and instead preserve the environment that's there. And so the students will have a chance to see basically what this gold mine looked like. They'll have a chance to mine for gold in the old-fashioned way, which is really just like panning for gold in the river there, which is a really interesting experience for them. They'll have a chance, I love this part, they'll have a chance to hear from the village elders. So there's a day where Rancho Quemado tries to involve everyone in the community in working with our students. So the younger students have a chance to play soccer and volleyball with students at night. You know, the more community members who are involved in the different activities will be working with the students during the day. But then there's a significantly older population who's not working in the fields anymore, who's not as active, but really enjoy having our students there. And so we go to visit these houses, and the elders tell us the stories of what it was like to be in Rancho Quemado back in the 70s and 80s, when there was no roads in and out, when it was taking, like, I forget how long the walk was, how many miles to the nearest port to get on a boat, to then get on that boat to go to the hospital. And the students are just amazed by the stories of these elders and hearing about what life was like before Rancho Quemado was so connected to the world. And even now it feels pretty disconnected, but to imagine what it was like, you know, giving birth in the jungle and having your husband go to get the doctor and being raised above in case animals came, like the stories that the students hear and the connections that they make with those elders are really special. So those will be the activities part. And then the work part, the students will be supporting the work of the biological monitoring committee. So they'll be learning about how this committee is mapping different trees and birds in the area. They'll have a chance to work in the nursery, and they'll also have a chance to do an environmental education class with some of the students there. Once we move on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. So this storytelling and all that is all in Spanish?
Yes, the storytelling is all in Spanish. We have translation for the students all the time. So there usually is 2 to 3 guides in Rancho Quemado who are bilingual. And then whatever guide, I'm hoping it's me, whatever guide from shoulder to shoulder is with the group will also be doing translation from Spanish to English all the time. So if students have studied Spanish or are interested in learning more about Spanish, they'll have that chance to be immersed, but there is no Spanish language requirement, and there'll always be translation done from Spanish to English so the students understand everything that's happening.
Thank you.
It's a good point, yeah, especially when we're thinking about language requirements and things like that. Yeah, it's not required, but it will be a good chance for students who have had some exposure to Spanish to see how much translates from the classroom to the real world. And then once we're in Cloudbridge, our work will be focused on supporting their efforts there. So we'll be setting camera traps. So they set camera traps so that at night when animals are walking through the forest, it will take a picture of them and the students will analyze where did they put the trap and what animals were walking by. They'll also have a chance to be planting some trees and learning about the importance of reforestation efforts there and how it relates to climate change. And most of the staff at Cloudbridge, actually all of the staff that work there has been completely bilingual. But again, if anything is being done in Spanish, it'll be translated into English for the students.
Catherine and I both have lived in Spanish-speaking countries before too, so we are able to help in that way as well.
It's always nice to have more than one person, because when it's one person, the day becomes very long and your brain just can't figure out which
Oh my gosh,
which language
I've
it's
done the
speaking.
translating living in Honduras, and it was just me, and it's like by the end you go to bed at like 7 p.m. because your brain's so tired.
Very tired. Yeah.
But we're happy to help.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, there'll be staff from both Rancho Quemado and Cloudbridge that will be able to translate as well.
If anyone has questions about Alpha Side 2, I know check chart is always a hot topic. We can talk about that here too.
Yeah, and also just as an overview, once we move into session 2, I'm going to host an information session with students who are interested about ways to plan out how to get work done on the check chart. I'm also running Rolingo next session, which is a workshop we ran last year to work on the Spanish component. And so it is a adapted A1 level Spanish test for our students to qualify. And so we'll be putting in a lot of work in that workshop with students who are aiming to go to Costa Rica, having priority admission into the workshop. So that way they'll get a lot of time to work on Spanish instruction.
Yes, I do have some concerns about the Spanish A1 test requirement. I took that test. I'm a tourist level Spanish speaker, and I scored 55%. And
yeah, it's a challenging test. We're doing an adapted version of it. So it won't be the full official length test, but it'll be adapted so that based on the amount of Spanish we're having students reach, just some kind of more official level test for students to learn. It's going to be challenging, but very doable. And students are welcome to take the test as many times as they need to.
Yeah. Okay, so my husband is fluent in Spanish, and this is like basic level Spanish test, and he scored 90%, which I don't think is great. And so this is the part that I have, I'm not so confident that our kids will be able to pull off. And second thing is, when I took the test, it was really mostly about conjugation and gendered and plural correctness of a plural. It was a lot of grammar kind of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's like they're going to be gone for 2 weeks, and they have basically like 2 months to do this. And I'm kind of curious what you think students will get out of by doing this. It's not a conversation Spanish. It doesn't really seem to have a practical application. So I'm a little confused about that requirement. And I know that when Switzerland trip, they had to have 30-day streak on French to qualify. To me, that's more doable than having to, pass A1 test, which doesn't seem like it's very useful to me at this point. So we're not speaking. Yeah, we're not a Spanish-speaking family, so they'll have to pretty much start from the ground zero. If you put that test in front of them, that A1 test that I grabbed from internet, they would absolutely score 0.
Yeah, it's a challenging test. And I think our goal this year, and in speaking, and I'm sure Emily can also speak to it as well, but we wanted to ensure a level of quality instead of just a level of quantity as far as what students are learning in Spanish instruction before.
Yeah.
And it will be very doable. It's going to be an adapted version of the test, so it won't be up to the full A1 level.
Yes.
And since we're adapting it, we're able to make it have more practical applications to the program. And I think on our end, what we really want to see is students are putting in effort to learn a language of the country that they're going to.
We did something similar to with the Poland trip when they went on the Learn and Earn to work with Ukrainian refugees. They learned Ukrainian on Duolingo. And in that, they had to get through, I think, 2 rounds of it. So it was like units 1 through 8. And then they took a test based on that. So it's going to be very similar to that, where everything that they've been learning will be applied on this test versus like, oh, I've been doing Duolingo for 2 months and learned these words about, the owl and the cat and all this. And then I get to this and it's only about conjugations of words I've never heard. So we're going to make sure that everything is applied based on their learning. We just, like Catherine said, we want to keep a high quality bar. Whereas a 30-day streak would be like, they could do 1 lesson or they could do 8, and it's hard to tell based on that quality bar. So this will just give us kind of that chance to test their knowledge and see where they're at. And again, they can take the test as many times as needed. So we are like more than happy to work with them, and Catherine's running a full workshop next session to work on their Spanish. So everything will be like created for them to thrive. We don't want to watch them like fail over and over. Yeah. They might the first time, and that's okay because we're going to give them more opportunities. But the goal is to reach that quality bar.
How many hours of extra work are you expecting kids to do to complete the check chart?
Not too much. I mean, the majority, so going through the check chart, that we have a few different options for one of them for what students should work on. And then one would be 400 to 500 word personal statement. So students are welcome to do that on their own time as needed. And if they want feedback from guides, that's also something we're all available for as well. One ethical leadership simulation, which I'll be running with students, and they should be able to crush through
during the school day.
Yeah, during the school day. Geography challenge, which students will study and prepare for ahead of time. And then the Spanish test will go in conjunction with Rolingo, which we're running. So it will take extra work because we want to make sure students are putting in the work to qualify for this trip, but it will be doable. And we also have until December, so we have a good amount of time to start prepping. And once session 2 kicks off, my plan is to meet with students. I've been getting all of their interests so that myself, as someone who's going on the trip, as well as these students' individual guides, can work to create a plan so that it's super doable over time, and also focuses on the time management component as well.
Definitely.
Yes, I have heard about I don't mean to be so argumentative, but on that Poland trip, I mean, most kids, they did all this Polish, study and language and all that. And from what I can tell, they pretty much forgot it the minute they didn't have to do that anymore. So, I hope that this language requirement is something that's not superficial, and something that they will keep, and something that they will use in the future in real life, and not so much of an obstacle course to qualify for this program.
Yeah, no, that's not our goal. Is we would hope that students also getting an introduction to Spanish so they can continue if they choose to in the future.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that I'll have no, I guess I can work with you both on what that looks like, but I think really motivating the students to think about and basing the test around conversational skills, and saying, especially for those evenings where they're playing soccer or football or volleyball with local students in the community. Obviously, they're not going to have a lot of time to learn Spanish, but any skills that they have or any ability that they have to speak, they really will be able to utilize to speak with peers in that country. And so hopefully that part will be motivating, and thinking about, what would you want to say about where you come from and where your school is, and how to greet them and things like that. And just to share those basics about themselves. So I'm happy to help in that too, and walk through what each day looks like, and to think about what vocabulary or what skills would be the most beneficial, and for students to understand that, it's not meant for anything other than, hey, when you're here, if you can say a few words with your peers when you're playing soccer or volleyball or things like that, it would make your experience that much better. So I'm happy to help both of you as you design that, and to really, because I agree too, to make it as practical as possible, and for students to see the why behind it is absolutely important.
Yeah. We'll fortunately have not just until December. That is when we'll take this test and qualify. That's for logistics and flight purposes. We can't have everyone qualify by March 21st and then go the 22nd. But looking forward, once those students all qualify, like, we can make it our point from December to March to really hone in on that Spanish, and not just be like, okay, we did session 2 workshop of Spanish, you're good. Like, they still have 3 more months leading up to it where they get to keep working. So they'll have about 5 months or so to really keep working on it. And then with Bill, we can develop even just a program that's more congruent with and like matches up with what we're doing in Costa Rica. So we'll have more opportunities outside of just by December 1st, which is good too. And Lulu, I see you.
Thank you for being patient.
Okay, I don't mean to hog
Okay,
the whole thing,
so
but while I'm at it, I'm going to ask.
sorry,
for
can
this.
can I just ask a question? Because I'm so sorry, but I'm driving and I
Yes,
really
go
want
ahead.
to be able to ask. So I just want to make sure that I am understanding this correctly. That you're making the requirements, there, but not too challenging to encourage more kids to participate. Is that fair? Is that a fair understanding of it?
Yeah, it's a requirement that students have to put time and effort into, and we want to show that they're interested and dedicated to putting in the work, but it's not supposed to be something that will eliminate students from being able to attend.
A big piece of it is that ownership. Just like if you are the one to purchase the car, you're going to take care of it better. It's kind of that idea where it's like, if you put in the work and we're not just sending you to Costa Rica, and you put in nothing, you have no ownership, then you don't get the same experience out of it. So when they put in this work and realize like what it's for and work towards that for months, like it's really valuable to see that outcome. And once they're there, they're like, wow, I realized all this work that I did, October to December, like it's all paying off here. So that's kind of why we do these like qualifications, more so not to be like, oh, let's make this impossible so no kids can go. It's more like, hey, we want to see you work towards this and we want to see you have that buy-in. So once you're a part of it, it means so much more. Yeah.
I love that. Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Sun Young.
Oh, it's okay.
It looks like Pamela.
Yes.
You have a question as well?
I do. So my son's Grady. He's new to Alpha, 8th grade. And so Grady really wants to try to qualify for the trip. And the Spanish would be the hang up for us because the days that you're offering the Duolingo enrichment, he has a conflict because he has an athletic sport that he has crew and he has to be there.
Oh, we're working on it and I can continue your question in school primarily during workshop time next session.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it isn't a requirement that they participate in the Duolingo after school then?
No, not at all. And they should be totally fine with in-school instruction during the workshop as long as they're putting in basically what I'm telling them to do every day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to add on to that,
an after-school program. So
no.
Okay.
I'm going to add on to what she asked, which is just clarification. So there's the Duolingo that you're going to do in school, and then there's the extended one to a few instruction that's also being offered. Is one preferred to the other? Do they overlap? Are they?
Students can choose if they want additional time. They're welcome to do additional. For the structure of the workshop, if any parents were familiar with it last year we did it with Ukrainian students would complete a certain amount of XP on Duolingo a day to qualify to go rowing. So we had super fun mechanism with it to reinforce grit and teamwork. But we're going to be doing similar things for Spanish. So students, a lot of times last year, students had a study hall where they would work on core skills as well and then do their Duolingo, or some students would choose to do it at home. Sometimes also we'll give students time during the week, during that workshop block, to also work on it as well. So that's what will get students there. If students want additional time to work on it and additional help, they're welcome to do so in the afternoon, but it's not required whatsoever.
And that can also be in limitless meetings as well.
Right. Well, I think what Pamela might have been referring to, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going off the name on your window there, was the instruction that's from 3:30 to 4. Yeah. 20, which is the tutor. So there's that's probably what conflicts.
Yeah, I don't think that's something either of us did. I think it's just a thing that's happening, and it happens to line up when we're running this program as well.
Gotcha.
So
okay, Pamela, is that where you were confused?
Well, yeah, actually, and that's the Spanish block would be a difficult thing for Grady. He's not immersed in Spanish, and so I know at the parents' meeting recently, the curriculum came up about, are we going to introduce some type of languages? I think that's where the Duolingo came from, perhaps.
Yeah.
But again, Grady having rowing and crew, he is required to be there, and he also has another online school at night, and that's what conflicts. And so I know he wants to try to qualify for the trip, and it would it'd create a large disagreement in the house if we didn't have clear understanding of what he has to do. to rise to the occasion. So that's why I asked for clarification about Duolingo. But as I
Appreciate
understand
that.
it, he has
Yeah.
the option of the Duolingo. These are not
Yeah.
related, but that would help
Yeah.
him if he could do it. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then one minor thing is, so Gus was really interested in doing Poland last year, and I don't know how much y'all were involved because I've lost track of who was involved, but he qualified,
Right.
and then at the last minute there was a change to the qualifiers, and they were reasonable, but he had very little time to do the additional qualification, and then he was pretty disenchanted with the whole program. And when I asked him the first time about this, because of what happened last year, and I qualified, and then they told me I didn't, and he felt really, I mean, he's more sad than he would acknowledge or admit.
No,
Again, the requirements were reasonable. They were just thrust on him like with 2 weeks, and he couldn't finish it. So, how is that? Do we learn from that? I mean, it's hard to anticipate that will not happen again. But if he qualifies for what it is today, he qualifies, and there won't be any curveballs. Okay.
That's the exciting part about this year and what has changed. I know transparently with Poland, the guides that put it together did have to put it together very last minute. So there was a lot of changes. But this year, my whole role is creating these experiences and creating them very early. So nothing like that can happen. There won't be any blindsiding pieces. And I'm sorry that happened to Gus last year. And I understand that can be a little traumatic to think about again, but he can rest assured, like, this check chart is the check chart. Nothing will change. If he qualifies, he qualifies.
Yeah. Also, thank you for bringing that up as well. I'm going to make that as a note to talk as far as like being a guide with the students every day in L3 and have conversations with that, because I know that was a sentiment that a lot of students felt last year. And so I want to reiterate that what is there is there.
Sure.
And there will not be any unexpected changes. So thank you.
He's on the absolutely, and he's on the fence, but we're trying to encourage him if he wants to do it to pursue it. So we'll decide. And is there a deadline? Do we have a deadline to let you know?
No, I think that I've been talking to students individually about indicating interest, so that way I can begin to work with them on plans to tackle the check chart. But students are welcome to decide whenever, as long as they complete those requirements by December 6th. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. And on our end, I know Sarah has a question there. On our end, there's really no, as I mentioned, so we have the backup group flight that I've reserved in case we are not able to get the individual flights. And I don't have to let the airline know about that till December 12th.
Perfect.
So that's really, on the part of shoulder to shoulder, when we look at non-refundable deadlines and things like that, we really just base it around, okay, when are we going to run into a non-refundable deadline? So I think we have a really nice runway here. And then as we get closer, we have the list of students, we can look at those individual flight prices as low, but there's no requirement from shoulder to shoulder. It comes up until mid-December.
Awesome. We're aligned there as far as when students will qualify for check chart.
Perfect.
So, awesome. And then Sarah, I see your hand is raised as well.
Yeah. I had two questions and that was one of them. It just answered, so that's good. And the other one was just going back a minute to the workshop that is based around Duolingo and Spanish. So are they going to have opportunities in that workshop to speak and practice, or is it literally just Duolingo, the app, the whole time?
That would be, no, hopefully it's not just Duolingo app the whole time. And I'm working on also getting with our academic team to provide some more practical applications, because I do recognize a lot of the limitations of Duolingo. So still working.
Naomi has been doing Duolingo in Spanish for a while, like off and on, little bits here and there, but it's just not really moving the needle at all. Like maybe it's moving the needle a little bit, but what she really needs is practice speaking, and she also has a conflict on Mondays and Wednesdays, so she can't participate in the after school thing.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
And then is that workshop, regardless of whether we end up deciding to do this program, she could participate in that Spanish.
Yes, it's open to all students.
Way, so okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Awesome. And Lulu or Pamela, did you have a question still, or is the hand?
I have a question about cost.
Okay.
So I think I saw on the PowerPoint, I think it said $37.99 plus flight, but I know there was for the tuition, but I know there was maybe I misread a mention of Alpha paying for some of it. Is that included? Like, what is the cost that we can expect? Obviously, we don't know what flights will be, but let's assume the flight is $800. Like, what can we assume outside of that?
If the flight is 800 plus 37.99, it would be half of that. Alpha's going to cover half of the total, like the grand total, including the flight.
Well,
so yeah.
Go Alpha School.
I can't do quick math in my quick math in my head. Hold on.
We work with a lot of schools, but yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So if the total, if it was 800, which would be the max for the flight, that would be 4,599. Divide that by 2. So Alpha would pay for 2,299.
Yeah. So the max. Yeah.
Amazing.
The max cost for anyone would be
that would be max cost.
Yeah. And then, like I said, ideally we can get those individual flights, but I just wanted to have a backup to know, like, okay, if you can't get the individual flights, am I paying? Yeah, and some of the group flights were crazy. There were, 1,200, 1,500, and we use a few different providers, but it's just a really busy time of year with lots of Texas and across the US people going on spring break. But yeah, and we'll, on our end, on the shoulder end, once that cost is determined, we'll work with Alpha School. And so when if you decide to apply, we have an admissions portal that you can go through and fill out all your paperwork. You can make the deposits there and make other payments there, and then that will just reflect the part from Alpha School as well. So we try on our end, we truly try and make the paperwork process as painless as possible. Of course, when you're collecting, we want to have enough information for all students to be safe, but I'd say it takes probably about 30 minutes or so, and it's just information about their food, allergies, any medical issues we should know of, some signed paperwork and things like that. But we're always here to support you as you're going through that. But on our end, it's really important to understand, who our students are, if people are carrying EpiPens, in terms of risk management, just having a really clear understanding of the students that we're bringing. And we always run that paperwork that you all fill out. I don't know if at other schools, there's a school nurse. And so we verify that with the school nurse to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of safety and risk management.
Awesome. I have a question for Bill.
Yeah.
So one of my kids who might be interested, if he doesn't give up, is very interested in birding and conservation. So I'm just curious how much opportunity he would have for his interest.
In birding, you said, sorry?
Birding and conservation.
And conservation. Yeah, so absolutely. We had one of our programs last year with the Asheville School, actually, one of the group leaders was really, really into birding. And there's a number of people in Rancho Quemado who are as well. And so he would wake up in the mornings and do that even before the group came to breakfast and throughout the day. What's really nice is that we have a great relationship with all of our partners. And so if I let them know, that particular interest in conservation or birding, as well as other ones, we can craft the program around that as well. So we can have either like a small group there's a few other students who want to do birding in the mornings before breakfast, we can have that happen. If the whole group is interested, we can build it into that. So we can absolutely, base the different things that they're doing. Or for example, when they're working, the Biological Monitoring Committee does a lot of different work, but part of the work is focused on birds. And so we could ask them to focus some of their work on that particular aspect as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And there is a lot of birds. Well, both in the Yosemite Peninsula and in Cloudbridge, there's a huge opportunity. Even when you're not, birding per se, there's birds everywhere. And I know when I was working with the teacher from the Asheville School, I wasn't even noticing things. He was like, "How do you don't notice this and this and this?" And I mean, when you're looking for it, there's the amount of biodiversity is just incredible. And there will be a lot of discussion around conservation, and in particular, what conservation means to local communities living there, because I think sometimes that gets left out of the conversation. So for the students to hear from community members about how conservation is really important to them, but at the same time, they need a livelihood, they need a way of making money, and how can they find this balance of conserving, but also taking care of their own economic welfare. So there's a lot of conversations around that part. And the people of Rancho Quemado are really honest as well about what it was like before the community came together, and that the fact that they used to hunt animals in the national park, that they used to gold mine. And particularly I know the last group I had, there was conversations around when the pandemic hit and there was no tourism, and so there was no income, there was no ecotourism, some of them had to resort back to feeding their families by hunting and things like that. And it really, they described the impact on their emotion, but also for students to hear that about that balance. And at some point, you know, I need to survive and feed my family, and there's no income here. And so I'm hoping that a lot of those conversations around conservation will be infused with both the natural element, but also the human element too, for the students to grapple with that as well.
Well, just
This
quick
is
feedback.
amazing. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I was going to say same thing. Great program, and really appreciate Alpus, you know, encouraging it, sponsoring it, both financially and resource wise. So we'll figure it out on our end, but it sounds interesting and fun.
Yeah, thank you all for considering it. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me after that. I'm happy to set up another phone call. If you'd like to set up, I know sometimes parents like to do a little phone call or Zoom, with their student that's interested. Shoulder to Shoulder is also a small, there's 3 of us in the organization. So we're a small organization. Our group sizes are small, and our relationships with our schools and our partners are really important to us. So we're not like some giant organization. So if you email me and want to set up a phone call or a Zoom, anything like that, I'm happy to do it. And I'm also really excited to be working with Alpha School. At Shoulder to Shoulder, we work with lots of different schools, but just to see the amount of preparation and engagement. I know obviously there's some concerns about how much, but just for students to understand that it's not just like another, I'm just going to like sign up for this thing and travel, which some of our schools do, for them to have that buy-in and to understand the importance of that preparation piece is really exciting. And I'm excited to work with the team here on customizing that, making sure it's interesting, engaging, and practical for what they're going to be doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. We really appreciate it. And I think questions on Shoulder to Shoulders and we're so light because you guys are so organized and so thoughtful with your organization and just everything we'll be doing. So I think parents and we as guides really, really appreciate your help and just everything y'all have done to make this organization what it is and just how on top of it you are. So I think the lack of questions is more positive than anything because it's like, wow, like you really have been so thorough and we really appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. And that's our hope at Shoulder to Shoulder is that you all are, as parents, obviously you have worries. So we try to make sure when we're thinking about risk management, that we're thinking about all of those things, but that also at our partner schools, you both are teachers, and it's not, it's my full-time job to look at logistics and risk and all of that. And so we really hope that we're taking the planning and logistic work off our school partners so they can really focus on the curriculum pieces like you both are. Yeah. So it's a really, really nice partnership.
Awesome. And thank you so much for all being involved and joining this call and just being interested and hearing everything and being excited and asking all of these questions. It's really valuable. And we're so glad you all took your lunch break with us. We really appreciate it.